and welcome to the Thursday episode of DB2 going into week 10. David Brem here with Daniel Butler as always. We are going to do something a little different today. We're going to just talk about, we're about halfway in the season, a little bit past. We let it go a little bit late, but just some of the biggest surprises in a positive light. Guys, were definitely overperforming what we expected come draft time. So, Butler, I'm going to let you kick this off. Let's start at quarterback. Who is your biggest surprise?
Yeah, so these are kind of like your fantasy MVPs. So the players that are going to be on the teams that are winning the most. Well outperforming their ADP, and several quarterbacks that you could go with. I just said that and I'm like I had a quarterback I wanted to go with, and I'm kind of like changing my mind. But I do want to mention Carson Wentz, just
Yeah.
because he has been such a pleasant surprise and has been really good, especially recently. So he's been really good. I have to mention that. Now, from a fantasy perspective, because he was, still, only like a top 15 guy, even though he's been, he was much lower than that. He's not drafted at all. I guess kind of. I mean, there's a few names, but Tom Brady is to me the guy who is going to be on the most winning teams for quarterback.
Mm-hmm.
He was drafted at quarterback 9, and you can make the case he is like quarterback 1 or 2 right now. So he's definitely top 3, I think. So you draft him at 9, you get one of the best quarterbacks in the game, and I don't know how Brady's still doing it, but he's doing it, and he looks great. This offense is really loaded. Their wide receiver core is insane. We might see a wide receiver pop up in the wide receivers when we talk about that. But yeah, so these are players that we think are going to, the players that are winning people their fantasy leagues. And for me, Tom Brady is right there as, top quarterback 1, 2, 3, right in the top 3, which is not, even if you were high on Brady, you did not put him in your top 3.
Yeah, and I drafted him in most of my leagues this season, and I was like, all right, I'm going to get a decent quarterback and stack the rest of my team, and he's done way more than that for me. So I think that's a great pick. My guy is Hurts. Like, I know Hurts, he was drafted just outside the top 10. Still is a starter in a 12-team league, but like right on that fringe where you're not thrilled about it. But his rushing has been more than we expected. At least on this show, more than we expected. His passing he's getting an okay amount of points through his passing game, which is like if you quarterback, you're like, oh man, I mean that's what I want. But his rushing is just so valuable in fantasy that Hurts is a guy. He's currently number 6. I honestly think he'll end the season right in that range, like 5 to 7, like somewhere in that range. You're just getting a ton of value for a guy that, I mean, think about where you drafted him compared to where you drafted a guy like, let's just go crazy and go Mahomes. Like, if you drafted Mahomes,
In like
you
the
drafted him
second
super
round,
early.
like
Yeah.
he was going
Or
way
you
too. We
got
talked about
Hurts.
that.
Yeah, you got Hurts fairly late in the draft. And he's just week after week performing for you. So I think Hurts is going to be one of those guys who's on a ton of teams that was able to kind of stack the rest of their lineup and Hurts put him over the top.
Yeah, and another name as well. So like Wentz, maybe in deeper leagues or 2 quarterback leagues, maybe more so.
Yeah.
Wentz would be super valuable. Brady's been great. Obviously, Hurts has been fantastic, consistent as well. Pretty much every week, top 10. Lamar Jackson, we got to mention because he just has such great upside. Maybe quarterback 1. I said Brady's right there. You have Lamar, you have Josh Allen, you have Brady. I think those are your clear top 3. And
Yeah.
Lamar is to me probably 1. I have to say he was drafted at quarterback 4, and I currently have him as 1. So I didn't draft a quarterback that high, but if you were to take Lamar at the spot he was drafted, I think you're looking pretty good.
Yeah.
Better than the guys like, even Josh Allen, even though he's kind of in that same breath, or Kyler, which was drafted before him, or obviously Mahomes. So you're in a good spot there. And I feel like for quarterbacks, that's kind of any other quarterbacks you have that.
I think those are the big ones that have been kind of difference makers compared to where you picked them up.
Yeah, quarterbacks, there's only 32 starting quarterbacks, so there's not like any like crazy big movers generally. The biggest one really is probably Mahomes. He's not even probably a top 5 guy right now. So that's probably, and again, drafted way too high, I thought. We talked about that in our early videos.
Yeah.
Check it out. We talked about that a lot. So that's definitely the one there. Then we go to running back. And I guess I'll let you talk about. I think probably not to split. I think
Yeah.
this is the fantasy, the MVP across the board of all.
Yeah, especially like just the difference he's making from a guy who just wasn't drafted, Cordarrelle Patterson, running back, wide receiver, whatever, wherever you play puts him, doesn't really matter. You're starting him. He has just come out of nowhere. Like, he was not a guy anybody thought about. He's a guy that, at least watching him previously, you could see how much talent he had. But he finally found a situation where they're just making spots for him. Like, they're putting him in the best position to succeed, and he's rewarding them. So a guy whose ADP was running back 73, so he just wasn't. I can't picture a even close to standard size league where he was drafted, and he is number 6. He's running back number 6. Like, you don't get this, doesn't happen in fantasy usually, and he has just gone from nobody's even considering to a guy that might have one of the most, like, if you were going to trade him, I don't know why you would, but if you were going to trade him, a guy you could almost get like probably one of the best values out there in the trade market fantasy wise.
Yeah. So what's interesting, maybe not interesting, but what I was looking at is his week by week rankings, and it's not one of sometimes it's not useful. Like Tyler Lockett had 5 really bad weeks and then had a really really great week. So it's like that's not really that useful though if he just then goes back to not having great weeks. Like you didn't play him that week probably. With Cordarrelle Patterson, week 2 he was running back 4, wide receiver 4, whatever he is, 4 in week 2, running back 4 that week. This is under running back rankings, but. And then in week 3, so let's say you didn't trust it, because 36 in week 1, 4 in week 2, you didn't trust it, and then week 3, 18. You're like, okay, at that point, 4 and 18, I think you're probably starting it. Week 4, running back 1. Week 5, running back 15. Week 7, bye week. Week 7, running back 19. Week 8, running back 11. Week 9, running back 7. He has been top 20, and some weeks way better than that, every single week that you would have played him. You wouldn't have played him in week 2, probably. You may have played him in week 3, you may not have when he was running back 18. But then after that, you probably were playing him every week. So it's not like you played him. You've enjoyed the spoils of Patterson. So he's been incredible. So yeah, it's easy. That's a really good one. And if you can play him at running back and wide receiver, like your favorite CBS, what is that?
CBS.
They allow.
I mean, it works out great for me. I play in CBS, and it's like a super shallow bench, so like it's great. But other than that.
Yeah, so he's a beast. I will say on not under the radar at all, but because of injuries and also just because he's been an absolute stud. Jonathan Taylor was drafted around like running back 10, and is maybe running back 1 rest of the season. You can make the argument at least.
Especially for stability.
He has been absolutely insane this year, and I'll just again say this going through the week. So since week 3, so week 1 he was 11, week 2 42, week 3 running back 35. So again, not great. You probably still rolling him out there. You never probably took him out of your lineup even after a couple bad weeks.
Yeah.
He has been top 8 every single week since week 4. 8, 2, 3, 7, 6, and 2. You can't get any better besides Derrick Henry, and obviously he's out now. So yeah, Jonathan Taylor well above ADP, and even was incredible last year from a fantasy perspective, but he still fell all the way down to around 10, running back 10, and has been really really good. And if you want like a lesser name, we talked about this a little bit, but Elijah Mitchell is obviously really he's done well because he's got the spot. I don't really put him in the same breath as some of these other guys.
It's a different situation.
It's like you may have picked him up on waivers, but like he's got the starting role, so it's a starting running back in the NFL, and he's done well with it. But it's not. I don't quite look at him the same way as I do as like a Jonathan Taylor or Cordarrelle Patterson for me. Is there any other names? I have a couple, but
I have one.
Okay.
Leonard Fournette. We went into the season not really sure what was going to be the running back situation in Tampa Bay, and if it was going to matter, if it was going to really be a valuable position anyways. And Fournette has made himself a every week starter. I mean, he started out pretty slow. It didn't really start until week 4. I mean, week 2 he was 21, so that's a pretty nice day. But even like week 1 was 30, 21, 39. So those are like okay outings, but then starting week 4, 13, 13, 2, 10. Week 8 was bad. He was number 42. Not a great situation, but like to go from 31, the 31st running back drafted. So a guy that I guess like you were thinking in a pinch, maybe I can start him in a flex or something like that, to a guy who is in your lineup on a weekly basis and you feel pretty good about, and a guy with top 2 upside. We've seen it. I just feel like that's one of the best values people got in this year's draft. And honestly, I think I picked Fournette up off the waivers in one of my leagues. Like there were leagues where he wasn't drafted
Or maybe even dropped, after week 3,
or
he's running back
dropped. Yeah,
39. I think there's a chance after week 3, maybe somebody dropped him. Even though he was clearly the guy over Ronald Jones, we could see that with the snap counts. It was pretty obvious. But yeah, a couple other guys. DeAndre Swift fell a lot,
yep.
injury concerns. A top 10 guy, I think, rest of the season. He's down
I'll give
10.
you credit on that one. He was the guy you were high on preseason too.
Yeah, super talented. I know a lot of, it wasn't, yeah, there's a lot of concerns there, but yeah, he's a top 10 guy. And, this isn't really under the radar, really. Najee Harris has done really well. He's in that conversation for one of the, the best running backs in fantasy. But Joe Mixon, I've been really impressed with. Joe Mixon has been, he's well over ADP now. So another name that you could have ended up with, you could have ended up with, like Cook or Eckler and, Mixon. So another guy as a second running back. A lot of teams probably have, they got drafted Mixon as their second guy. Now, obviously, if you had Henry, you were great before, now not so much. But, there's, if you could easily have Kamara and Mixon, which, have 2 top 8 guys, 9 guys. You could have Eckler and Mixon, a lot of combinations. You could pretty much have any of them.
A ton of
You could honestly have Patterson, Mixon, and Jonathan Taylor or something. Like you could have something wild like that. But that's the beauty of fantasy. You got these guys that show up out of nowhere, and if you draft well the rest of your positions, you could have just an absolutely loaded roster.
Yeah, absolutely. You good on running back?
I think we talked about every running back in the NFL, so I think we're good.
I think we touched on most of them. I'll start off wide receiver, and this is a little bit of patting myself on the back, but also even I'm surprised. So Jamar Chase has been one of the breakout stars this season, and we talked about a lot preseason. We thought he's going to be the guy in Cincinnati, but I will admit, in my head, that meant best case scenario 15, but probably somewhere in that 15 to 20 range. That's kind of where I was thinking. He is number 7 on the season. Was drafted at 29, just been a stud. We talked about this. The chemistry he has with Burrow, we thought was going to be good, but it has been even well above what even I expected. So we talked about early, he was kind of touchdown. Like he's going to touchdown every week. Like he can't keep that up. He continues to keep it up. He didn't have one last week, so kind of a poor day, but a guy who really, I mean, you draft him at the 30th best wide receiver, and now he's 7. That makes a huge difference on your team.
Yeah, and he might even be top 5, like if you were redrafting. Rest of the season. So he's been really, really good, and hopefully you got him. I got him, and I'm sure you got him in a lot of leagues as well.
Oh yeah, I did.
Yeah, he's been fantastic. But
I will always regret my dynasty league that I took Pitts over him. But other than that, I'm super happy.
But you said running wide receiver 7, Jamar Chase, right?
I did.
What about wide receiver 6, Hollywood Brown? Currently, wide receiver 6, well over. He was drafted at like wide receiver 50, well over where he was drafted. And I've said this many times. His bad weeks, there has only been a couple. Could have easily been big weeks, a few drops in there. So like,
yeah, he could be number 2 fairly easily.
Like every week has that threat to be number 1 wide receiver, and basically has, I mean, not been that, but like he's been top 5 a couple weeks, top 7, 3 weeks. So yeah, he's basically a top 17 guy. Well, he has been a top 17 guy every week, but twice, and those other 2 weeks could have been monster games. If he a few drops in there. So he has been incredible. A guy who I think a lot of people, it always like when I look at the rankings, he's always ranked really a lot lower than I think. I just don't see how you wouldn't have been starting him though. Like it was like, oh yeah, he's ranked as like wide receiver 30, or I'm like, I don't see how you can start him over some of these other guys with just this upside of he's got top 5, top 1 even potential every single week, and he is Obviously, after the first, let's say you didn't start him in week 1 or week 2, 17 in week 1 and 7 in week 2. Week 3, you would have played him in wide receiver 54. You're not happy, but then he was 13, 3, 52, not great, 10 in week 7, and then week 9 he was number 5. So besides the 1 or 2 weeks this year, I mean he's been fantastic.
Yeah,
and there's not too many
Well,
wide receivers you can just pick up and be like top 10 every week.
no, absolutely. I think, but I'm going to, since you tried to one up me, I'm gonna multiple up you. I see you're 6, and I raise you the number 2 wide receiver on the year. Deebo Samuel, drafted at number 35, wide receiver 35, has been number 2. Started out with a bang, number 3 week 1, and then 27, 43. So a couple bad weeks. People probably started to wonder, like, maybe that was a fluke. But then 2, 19, by 7, 8, and then 26 this week has just been, and his big weeks are huge. Like, just does so much, has really proved that he's the guy. He wasn't, everybody kind of thought Ayuk was going to be the number 1 there. Samuel has taken over. He's the guy. And to be the number 2, like to get the number 2 wide receiver at 35, like the guys you could have him paired with, like the difference on your team could be immeasurable if you were able to pick up Deebo Samuel.
That's really interesting. No, he's been really good. But I'll up your 2. And actually, I was like, this is silly because obviously everybody knows. But yeah. I mean, he has. I think besides Patterson, I think that this guy here, because of how much better he's been than all receivers,
absolutely,
and he might be because of how many points he scored. And Patterson has been amazing where you drafted him, but because Cooper Kupp has been in your lineup every week, and how many points more he scored than wide receivers, you could obviously make the case that this guy, Cooper Kupp, is the MVP because he's just so much better than everybody else. Wide receiver 1 on the year, Cooper Kupp, well over projections. He was still a top 20 guy, but Woods was drafted over him. And
there's a big difference between 17 and like a clear-cut one.
Yeah.
Like the Derrick Henry of wide receivers.
Yeah, so Derrick Henry, obviously would have been probably 1 with Cooper Kupp 2, Cordarrelle Patterson 3, or somewhere, something like that, I think. But right now, with Derrick Henry going out, I think Henry probably was 1, but Cooper Kupp was right there. He's well over. He's well over. I want to say, I can actually look. Like, I think it's like 6 points, 5.5 points over Deebo Samuel per game. Game, like that's insane. There's only 3 wide receivers that are averaging over 20 points per game. Deebo, Cooper, and Tyreek Hill. But Tyreek and Deebo are barely over 20. Cooper Kupp is over 26. So he might be the MVP. If you have him, you mentioned, like, I mean, I just want lineups that could exist. Like, you could have, I mean, you could honestly have the top 3 guys. You could have drafted Tyreek early. You could have gotten Tyreek, Cooper Kupp, and Deebo. I don't know.
Easily.
But you could definitely you could have drafted
paired with Tom
Adams.
Brady, and you're just
you could have drafted Devontae Adams and really you could, but you could have drafted Devontae Adams super early and then got Cooper Kupp and Deebo Samuel or something. Like, you could have 3 or Jamar Chase, and then Jamar Chase on the bench, and you're like, okay, what do I do with Jamar Chase? But like, you could have these guys, which is so much fun. That would be a crazy lineup. It's possible. So I know that means a perfect draft, basically.
Yeah.
But I know those exist.
Or a time machine. Those are really the only 2.
We do have to put that out there. Like, if you see that lineup out there, that there might be something that happened.
Some kind of time travel, yeah.
I don't think we can rule that out if somebody has a team like that.
Yeah. So, you good on wide receivers?
Yeah. I'm sure there's some.
I don't want to talk about everybody. Like, let's.
There's some names. I'm sure there's other names that people that are well over. But I think those are pretty much all the big
those ones. Are the big ones, yeah. I'll start off on tight end. For me, it's Knox. It's Dawson Knox. He's currently the number 5 tight end. Has missed a couple weeks, but currently on a points per game, number 5 tight end. Wasn't drafted at all. I mean, the 35th ranked tight end. Nobody was thinking about him. If, like, obviously a guy you picked up, you may have picked him up after week 1 if you were really bold, but probably after week 2 when he was 12. And if you did that, he rewarded you with a 7, a 1, and a 3 after that, and then a 23 in the week before the bye. So, just a guy, another one of these, just kind of like Cordarrelle Patterson, not to that level really, but came out of nowhere. Nobody was thinking about him. Nobody was playing him to a every week written in stone starter.
Yeah, he's been really solid. Dawson Knox as I think what you could honestly make the case, even though he's right where he is. Maybe not this year, but generally like Travis Kelce, just because he's been so much ahead of everybody. Even though you drafted him in
Yeah.
tight end one, this year he's averaging one more point than tight end two Mark Andrews per game. But the guy I want to talk about, he's less than 4 points per game, which based on the fact that this guy could have been picked up on waivers and Travis Kelce was drafted in the first round. I think this name makes a lot of sense, and that's somebody that I've been high on since basically I want to say week one. Like after I saw that him and Blake Jarwin were basically neck and neck snap count, I'm like, this is a name I'm kind of interested in. I love the Dallas offense, and that's Dalton Schultz. He is definitely a top 10 guy, and again, he's averaging over 12 points a game, which is huge for a tight end, really. And when Kelce's averaging 16, less than 4 points off of Kelce, so he's to me like getting a guy who's that close to Kelce, the gold standard. Now I know Kelce hasn't been Kelce this year. Tight end has Kelce averaging. He's number one, but it's not Kelce number one. He's not that far ahead. But 4 point difference between him and number one, getting somebody that you could just picked up off waivers. It was because Kelce was the first round. Like you could have drafted a lot of guys, or if this is like the great thing too. Like I always say, like you could have this amazing lineup, but if you whiffed on round one, maybe you got unlucky. Maybe you got Derrick Henry, so you obviously weren't able to get. You didn't whiff. Obviously, Henry was great, but you maybe got somebody that went, or McCaffrey, has been out for a while. You have these guys, and you're like, there's no way you could have got Kelce anyway. Yeah, you lost him, but you also picked up somebody later on where you're able to kind of make up a little bit of that ground of that loss with somebody
It's
like
one of
a
those
Dalton
things
Schultz.
like I waited on running back in a lot of leagues, and so like picking up Cordero made a huge difference for me. Like that's kind of this situation. If you waited on tight end, or you listened to some fat guy on YouTube and thought Robert Tonyan might be decent, like Schultz could have saved your team coming off waivers. Like could have saved your team because you were just had nothing going.
Yeah, so again, you have to. I mean, it depends on your team, obviously, like which guys are more valuable. But to me, Dalton Schultz is definitely in that conversation, given how close he was. I'm not saying because it's we're talking 12 points a game. I'm not saying it's Cooper Kupp. I think this is if you said like the most valuable, I would say this is probably not even top five, but still a tight end you could have got later. If you said who was the best value of all, I would say it's Cooper Kupp probably, but Patterson is right there as well. And I don't know if
No, I agree with you.
besides any. I mean, I'm trying to think of any other names
There,
besides.
those are the two real names at tight end I think this
Yeah,
season.
so those are the guys. And if you drafted Kelce, I think you're decently happy. It's kind of weird that I'm a Kelce owner in a league, in a money league. I thought the value was too good where I got him, and even though he's tight end one, and I think the numbers kind of back that up. Like 16 points a game, I was expecting more. Like he is the best tight end in the league, but this is a product also of Kansas City's offense just not being good right now. But Kelce's still a stud, and I think we might have better data. We might look back in a month and be like Kelce's averaging 18 points a game or whatever. He might have brought that up a bit, but he could have some really big games, and I'm sure Kansas City will have some big games coming up. But yeah, I think he's been a little disappointment, so that kind of helps too. It helps the gap not being as large, because that was the reason I liked Kelce so much, was because the gap between 1 and 8 was so big. Well, this year it's not. So Kelce versus Schultz is not really even that far different. So just some names. I thought this would be a fun idea to do a video on. Who are the fantasy MVPs of this year? And I say Cooper Kupp. What do you think? Like
I'm going with Cordell.
You're going with Patterson.
Yeah.
I think I'm just thinking like it depends on how you define it.
Yeah, I don't disagree with your choice. I just think I'm more of a fan of the out of nowhere.
Yeah,
guys.
I think I'm gonna assume that I don't know if this is true at all, but Cooper Kupp will be on more teams that win than Patterson, like just from if that's your metric, but it depends on how you
Yeah.
define it, obviously. And I might end up being wrong on that anyway. So
I just I just hope there's a team out there that has Cooper Kupp, Cordero, and Jamar Chase. I just want that team to exist.
yeah, I'm sure it's out there somewhere. But yeah, thank you so much for watching. Hopefully you
Yeah,
did enjoy.
thank
Come
you.
back tomorrow. We're gonna do the biggest disappointments. So those picks that just didn't work
I
out so
want them
well.
back.
Yeah,
So
those are that's coming tomorrow. So make sure to come back for that. Hit the like, subscribe, comment, all that stuff, so you don't miss a DB2 video. And thank you
absolutely.
so much for watching. Have a good one. Peace.
See ya.